Okay, we're looking at Song of Solomon verses 7 and 8 today. This is another song which follows on the heels of the one we had last week. So at the very end of this, I'll sort of connect it to last week's song. But this is a simple dialogue, two verses. The first verse is the woman speaking to the man, and the second verse, for the first time, is the man speaking back to the woman. And what we find is this little dialogue between them. Now, as you do this, as we look at this, notice, this is interesting, that in these verses, we don't see him as a king, we see him as a shepherd. So some people think that means because there's two different men involved in this book. One is Solomon and another one is a shepherd. Other people think that this means Solomon was also a shepherd. Some people, like this is the view I'm taking, just assume that the songs are not all part of one story necessarily, although they're connected, and that the other one was a song about a king and this is a song about a shepherd. But however you think about it, this is focused on a shepherd. And she says, "Tell me, O you whom my soul loves, where do you pasture your flock? Where do you make it lie down at noon? For why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions?" Now, the one who veils herself, that phrase is a little bit tricky. Nobody knows quite what that means. I assumed when I first read this that maybe women typically veiled themselves, but apparently that's not true. And then I wondered if she meant, I vaguely remembered hearing that maybe prostitutes would veil themselves. So she's saying, why should I be like that? I should be able to be honorable. But apparently that only happened one time in Genesis, and it wasn't a custom of the time that prostitutes were necessarily veiled. That was just sort of that one story in Genesis where Dinah veiled herself so that she wouldn't be recognized. So nobody's quite sure why it talks about the veil here. It seems like she's saying, why should I have to sneak around and not let your companions see that I'm sort of spying on you or something, or trying to find out about you? So regardless of it, the basic meaning is clear. She's saying, tell me where you are. Let me into your life. I want to see you at work. I want to see you at doing your pastoring. I just want to be with you. And I don't want to have to sneak around or veil myself or anything. I want to go right along with you and your companions and be there. Notice that she's not just talking about being in private with him. She's talking about being in his public life, being at his workplace, being with his friends, being with him in that place. And he responds, "If you yourself do not know, most beautiful among women, go forth on the trail of the flock and pasture your young goats by the tents of the shepherds." So she called him, "You whom my soul loves." He calls her most beautiful among women. So he's also taken with her. He's smitten with her. And this is the first time we've got him responding to her and see that he also loves her. And he says, he invites her into his life, but he doesn't just say, here's where I'm going to be. He says, if you really don't know, then follow me and find out. So it's a little coy. He's responding, but he's still making her come a little further towards him. He's saying, if you really want to know, then here's how you can find out. Let's see how real you are, how sincere you are about this. But the point is that he's inviting her into this. He says, pasture your young goats by the tents of the shepherds. I think he means, come with me, come with my companions. We all shepherd together. We all go together. Come along and just join us. Pasture your young goats there, and you can join us and be part of my life. So this is interesting because the heart of this, let me see, I think I've skipped over everything I was going to say here. Yes, her request and his response. And the main point, the heart of this is that she wants to become part of his life. She wants to be with him in his daily routine. She wants to be with him when he's at work, when he's with his friends, and that he invites her to do that. He welcomes her into his life. He says, come along with us, hang out with us, see what everything's about. And I think this is a really important part of human love. When we're really falling in love with somebody, we don't just want to be alone with them. We also want to be with them in all sorts of different situations. When I was beginning to fall in love with Kate, I used to love watching her interact with other people. I loved seeing her with her coworkers or with her roommate or with the people she was discipling or with the people with parents or kids or anything else. I just loved seeing the way she interacted with people. That all showed me more about her and just made me appreciate her all the more. And she was kind of the same thing with me. She liked watching me interact with all sorts of different people. And at its healthiest, falling in love and being in love is about joining our lives together so that we are with each other in all the different things we do. So that he says to her, come along with me, come along with us, see me with my companions, with the other shepherds, and pasture your goats there and just be right along with us. You are welcome to do that. So I think this is actually, it's not what you usually think of as romantic in one sense, but in another sense it very much is. Again, think of rom-coms. In rom-coms, when they're introducing you to the characters, don't they start by letting the characters see each other interact with other people in other circumstances at work and at play and in all sorts of different situations? And the more they see each other in these other situations, that's when they begin to fall in love. That's when they begin to have it begins to really deepen. And that's partly what's happening here. All right, so what's the metaphor? Well, the metaphor is that this is the kind of relationship God calls us into. That God does not just call us to be slaves to a God, which he has every right to do, but he calls us to be he invites us into his life. And he's maybe a little bit coy, like this man. He says, if you want to, follow me. If you want to, come close to me. If you want to get close to me, seek me. And if you seek me with all your heart, you'll find me. If you delight yourself in the Lord, then I'll give you the desires of your heart. If you pursue me, I'll let you find me. And that's kind of what's going on here. So this is, for Israel with Jehovah, this would have been something they would have thought of. That Jehovah wanted to be Israel's God and wanted them to be his people. One of the passages that I think is really fascinating about this, it's not one you would normally think of, is a small phrase in Genesis 18, 16 through 19. Here's the context. First of all, God has just spent some time, God has visited Abraham in the person of the angel of the Lord and two other angels, and they talk to Abraham and Sarah, and they reassure them that he has promised a son. And then the two angels that are with him are going to head out to Sodom and Gomorrah and destroy it. And as they're about to go, he decides to bring Abraham, to make Abraham a part of this, to talk with him about it. He says then the men rose up from there and looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham was walking with them to send them off. And the Lord said, this is him talking to himself, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. For I've chosen him, that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. He says, I've chosen Abraham to represent me and to follow me and to do righteousness and justice and teach all his children and be a blessing to the whole earth. I'm about to go judge something. Shouldn't he be a part of this? Shouldn't I take him with me, so to speak, or at least not take him with me, but talk to him about it? I won't hide it from him. So he begins to tell Abraham what he's doing, and they have a long conversation where Abraham's saying, but what if there's righteous people in it, and so on. And that's a very important conversation. But my point for now is, isn't this interesting that God says, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? And the answer is no. He invites Abraham into his life. It reminds me of where it says that Abraham was called the friend of God. Reminds me of where Jesus says, I haven't called you slaves, but friends, because all things that I've heard from my Father have made known to you. I've opened my life to you. I've opened what it is to walk with me. I've opened that up to you so that you can understand what it is to be in my place and to do the kinds of things I do. And the same thing again is, of course, is true for us. Just I've said, Jesus invites us to walk with him. Now, he's not physically here on earth anymore, but he still invites us to walk with him. There's this whole concept of abiding in Christ, that we live our Christian lives not just following a set of rules and not just as obedient slaves to a Lord and Master, although he has every right to ask that, but as friends, as people invited to be companions of his, as people that he wants to walk beside and have us walk beside him. And he comes into our lives, but he also invites us into his life. And you can see that all over the place, but the passage I chose is a familiar passage about abiding in Christ. He says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. My Father's glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. So he starts by saying, if you abide in me, what he means is if you remain in me, if you live in me, if you dwell in me, if you stay close to me, if you stay close to me and my words stay close to you, first of all, he says, you can pray, you can ask, and I'll be there, just like a companion. I'll be there to hear what you have to say. My Father will answer your requests because you're going to bear fruit in me as you do this. And he wants to make you successful as disciples. I don't mean successful in the world's eyes. I mean, he wants to make you successful in following me. He wants to make you fruitful. And then he says, just as the Father has loved me, I've also loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you'll abide in my love, just as I kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. So what he's saying is, think about the way that I live with my Father. Everything he asks me, I do. Everything he says, I say. Everything he does, I do. Everything I do is in sync with him, and he showers me with his love. He He walks with me, and everything I do, he's behind and working with, because everything I do is what he's doing. And we stay so close together. He says, if you abide in my commandments, if you keep my commandments, you can abide in my love in the same way. I can be with you every step of the way. Not that he ceases to love us if we don't follow his commandments, but that we don't abide in that love. We don't rest in it. We don't live in it and dwell in it. So he says the ideal way that you can live as a Christian is, yes, you're obedient, but you're not obedient just as slaves to a master. You're obedient like I am with my father, like a son with a father, or like a friend with a friend. Both those analogies are used in John 14 through 17. And then he says, these things I've spoken to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be made full. I want you to live your life with me, he's saying. I want to live my life with you. I want us to be close. I want us to be in a relationship. And this is, again, the glory of the Song of Solomon. It talks about these human relationships and the important things in those human relationships, and then says, and then we can see in it that that's a picture, just a small picture of the greatness of the relationship that God has with us. Okay, see you next week.